Tilehurst End podcast
by Reading fans for Reading fans.
Hello and welcome to the Tilehurst End podcast extra in association with the Working in Paper. Whilst it's been all change at Reading with Jaap Stam gone and Paul Clement brought in, it remains business as usual here at TTE, as my name is still Olly Allen, your host for today's show. I'm delighted to still be joined by Working in Paper's Tom Crocker. Morning, Tom. How are you?
Morning, Ollie. Not too bad, thank you. I've returned from the international break with a footballing injury, but apart from that, not too bad at all.
Oh, no, you're adding to Reading's lengthy injury list.
Yeah, a little bit. I think I'm on the mend now, though, hopefully fighting fit for tomorrow. That's the plan.
So this is indeed the first Tilehurst End podcast extra since Reading's change of manager. And so we will start when Jaap Stam was still in charge, all the way back at the Norwich game 2 weeks ago when Reading lost 3-2 at Carrow Road. Liam Kelly and Sam Smith got the goals for the Royals that day, but Mario Vrancic, Grant Hanley and James Maddison all scored for Norwich to give them the win. We won't talk about the game itself much because obviously what happened during it is really of little significance now, obviously, since. And I also can't remember that far back. But after the game, Andrews Alderink spoke to the media instead of Jaap Stam. At the time, I sort of brushed this away as sort of nothing to read too much into. But in hindsight, Tom, was this sort of a sign of what was to come in the next few days?
Obviously, it's worked out that way. It obviously feels like a long time ago now, like you say. Jaap usually does the post-match stuff. I mean, usually for some sort of cup games, Andries will do it just to sort of change up the voice maybe. But yeah, it was an interesting one. You wonder quite what Jaap was up to. Maybe he knew then that he was just saying some final words to the players possibly before they went away. But I say it seemed to come as a surprise though to everyone when it did happen still. So I don't think anything was decided then. Maybe you just didn't fancy going over the same things again and again after another defeat. Maybe it was just as simple as that. But yeah, I think it was a culmination probably of that, and results elsewhere made the position look a lot more perilous in the league. And yeah, you like you say that seemed to be or maybe not the beginning of the end, but that when you look back at it now, it stands out as a possible moment where we should have maybe taken a bit more notice of it. But when the decision came, it still came as a massive surprise to everyone, I think.
Yeah, as mentioned there, it was then announced, of course, on Wednesday morning that Stam had left, having met with Ron Gourlay and the owners on Tuesday night. The club statement said that his departure was by mutual consent. Do you think this was the case, that Stam sort of agreed that his time was up, or is this sort of media speak for that he's been sacked?
Yes, it usually comes out as sort of mutual, but when you first saw it, you just presumed it was a sacking. But obviously, you sort of read Jaap's comments as well, and you listen to the guys since then, and it seems like they all knew it was sort of going the wrong way, and I don't think anyone really. Well, I don't think Jaap obviously wanted a relegation on his CV, and he could only see it heading that way, probably the way things were going, and I think the club were probably forced him into maybe agreeing that now was the time to make that change. Obviously, they obviously had Clement lined up, as you mentioned there, and they all agreed now was a good time. I think this was probably now or never really of the international break. It was the final chance they had to make a change. I think they did try and give it as long as they possibly could, and I don't think you can really fault them for that. Obviously, he did so well last year, and it seemed like the final moment, and all parties I think will be fairly satisfied with the outcome. They can go their separate ways, and hopefully it's just about enough time to keep Reading up now.
Yeah, I mentioned Ron Gourlay there, and it very much seems as though he was sort of the man responsible for this change, and technical director Brian Teveridden, who of course was quite influential in bringing Stam to the club. He had seemingly very little say on the matter, and obviously Brian Teveridden wasn't present at Paul Clement's unveiling later in the week. Do you think this sort of is the case now that sort of Gourlay has sort of the final say on things, and do you think perhaps we could even see Teveridden himself depart, obviously, in the near future?
That's the question I put to Ron Gourlay actually on Friday about Brian, and he sort of said Brian works for Reading and not for Jaap Stam, so he's very much of the opinion that Brian's going to be staying, and that he's brought Paul in as another sort of relatively young, ambitious coach, and they want those sort of people in and around the club. So from what they said, there's no plans to move Brian on. Obviously, he had interest in him a few months ago, and maybe over the summer something might change on that front, but right now I think the plan is to keep him there. And yeah, it was perhaps a little surprising not to see him, just the two of them at the press conference, which is obviously a lot less than we usually see there. So I think it's pretty clear from Friday though, the way they were talking, that Ron's very much running the show now from here, and he's just got communicating with the owners and passing on his suggestions, and they're agreeing to to what he's saying quite a lot of the time. So yeah, I think he's obviously running it a lot more than Brian. Obviously, he, like you say, he played a big role in bringing Jaap in, but Ron and Paul Clement worked together at Chelsea. I think it's very much his man, and the owners were happy to go with that. So it's it's Ron's sort of big appointment, I suppose, and a lot of what he does at Reading will maybe be decided by how Paul Clement gets on, because it's obviously his first big decision, really, because obviously he came in after Jaap Stam did. So I don't think the owners particularly wanted to make the change. I think they're more trying to focus on what's going on behind the scenes at the club, and trying to just keep it sort of ticking along on the field, maybe. But I think it's very much Ron Gourlay is sort of running things now from England and communicating with the owners on a regular basis, and that seems to be how it's working at the moment now.
Of course, whilst most fans obviously seem quite happy with the change, I think one set of people who haven't seemed quite happy with it is seemingly the players. We've seen quite a lot of messages on social media, likes of Chris Gunter, Gareth McCleary, all coming out sort of saying that they've let him down, that they're disappointed to see him leave. Do you think, obviously, considering that Reading's terrible run of form, that they were still behind the manager, that it's sort of telling that he still had he certainly hadn't lost the dressing room, had he?
No, absolutely. I think it was interesting to see quite how many people would come out. I think obviously I thought a few maybe would, but when you obviously speak to the players in that situation, they all say they're backing the manager, as you'd expect. They don't want to lose their place in the team by going against the manager or anything. But for them to come out and say it when he's gone, it's it's a big statement. There's no need for them to do that, really. But I think they don't forget what he did last season, for one, and I think many of them felt they did improve as a player under him, and I think it's fair to say they've all, by and large, underachieved this season. So I'm fairly confident. It was sad to see Jaap go. I'm fairly confident he'll go on to have a good career still. It's just this season it just wasn't quite going out. I think that the plan would have been to try and get it through to the summer and maybe look to move him on then, possibly. But it was just got to a point where it was just too big a risk to take, I think, to leave him in charge with just one win since November. I think the players, there was no big dressing room fallout that you can get a sense of. All the sort of senior players came out and backed him, and I suppose it's nice to see that. But it's also a little bit of a concern that it wasn't the fact that they downed tools or anything. But we'll have to see how that plays out on Friday night.
I was going to ask you, actually, do you think this ultimately was sort of the right decision to let him go? So you just, as you mentioned, now one win since November, one win in 18 league games, one clean sheet in 19 league games, and obviously the defeat to Norwich, taking the team just 3 points above the relegation zone. Or do you think that Stam could have perhaps turned it around next season?
I'm very much of a similar opinion to the owners, really, that he deserves as much time as they could possibly give him. I know a lot of fans wanted him gone in sort of December, January time, when some of the poor home performances and defeats, and obviously the crowd attendances have fallen, which is something Paul Clement alluded to actually on Friday. So you have to wonder if that maybe has come into their thinking a little bit, that the fans are staying away and the club's sliding down the league. But I think at that point against Norwich, they've moved to just 3 points clear, and there's a tough run in of games which maybe you just need a new face in there to try and shake them up and get a few more wins. I think they would have probably just about stayed up under Stam, and I think they probably will do under Clement as well. But I think, like I said, I think he would have moved on in the summer anyway. So perhaps they've seen an opportunity to get Paul Clement in now rather than then, and jumped at it. So it's sad to see him go, but I think when you look at the position they're in, you have to understand why they've made it, and I don't think anyone can have any real complaints with that.
To finish on Stam then, what sort of, from the press perspective, will be your overriding memory of Stam's time in charge? Obviously, how he massively surpassed expectations to take the club within a couple of penalty kicks away from the Premier League last season, or do you think he sort of tarnished that a little bit through this season's abysmal form? But sort of, what was his relationship with the press like sort of through his time in charge? Yeah,
he was great to deal with, really. I think he was obviously a big name that came in, and it took everyone a little bit by surprise that Reading managed to get hold of him, and it was his first managerial role, and it was really enjoyable to sort of work alongside that and watch his journey as a manager. Obviously last season it looked like it was going to end in a sort of fairy tale promotion to the Premier League, and who knows where he would have gone on from there. But yeah, in terms of the press, he always had time for whatever you wanted, really. He was brilliant to deal with. That's why it's sad to see him go, really. But essentially it's down to the results, and that they just weren't coming. I think he sort of knew that. He'd obviously said in recent conferences he was fed up of losing and what have you, and it just seemed everything they tried giving players days off, took them away on a break and giving them extra training, and they tried everything, and just nothing was really working. So yeah, it's good that obviously it hasn't been completely tarnished by relegation. I think he's managed to get out, and in a few years' time you'll look back at it and I think remember the first season more than the second one. just because of how close he took Reading. I think you guys mentioned on the pod the other day, it's the closest they've been to the Premier League, getting back in there since they went out of it. So I think that will be how he's remembered in the long term. I think he was trying to bring a new style and a new way of playing to Reading. I think he'll probably take that philosophy elsewhere, and I think he's brought a lot of young guys through as well. So a lot of them will always remember Jaap as the guy who brought them through, and I think he's done a lot of good things. It's just right now it's obviously when this season's over, I think you can look back at it a bit more, but if they end up getting relegated now, then it will be a little bit of a taint on what happened last season, I think, because obviously he's taken them down towards the bottom of the league this year.
Certainly. For more reaction, as Tom mentioned there, myself and Mark Mayer recorded a show just hours after the announcement was made last week, so go back and listen to that if you haven't already. As we move on to the new man in the hot seat then, Paul Clement, who was announced as Stam's replacement on Friday on a 3-year deal, sort of having been the overwhelming favourite virtually ever since Stam was sacked. You were at his first press conference at the Manstad, Tom. What were your first impressions of Paul Clement?
I think the two words that sprung to mind when listening to him, he's very confident, he's very ambitious. I think he came across, and obviously he was sacked by Derby and Swansea in the last few years, but he wasn't. He said that neither of those were really failures. He didn't feel, and he wouldn't let anyone else judge how his previous roles had gone. And he's very confident. He said he had absolutely no doubt that Reading will stay in the Championship, which is probably more confidence than anyone else really has at the moment, given maybe he hasn't watched the team in the last few months, not too sure, but he seems to have no doubt that he can turn them around and that he can get this squad playing again, which I think that's possibly the best approach to do with it. Obviously you need the results to back it up, but if he can go in there with that sort of outlook, then that should hopefully galvanise the camp a little bit. And he's very ambitious. Like you say, it's a 3-year deal. He's here for the long term. He wants to find a club to settle down at. He's got some sort of ties with Reading as well. I think his brother used to play here, and he's been quite a few times in the past, and he wants to bring the youth guys through as well. And I think all the plans are there for the long term, but essentially if these 8 games don't go well, I don't think he'll be able to fulfill those plans. But Kirk came across very confident. He couldn't wait to get back in. I think he was in America when the call came, and he flew straight back, and he was in charge 2 or 3 days later. So he's been out of work for 3 months, and I think it sounds like he's 3 months too long, I think is what he said. And he just loves coaching. Obviously he's coached at some of the biggest clubs in the world, and managerial wise it's perhaps not gone quite as well as maybe that his coaching time, but he's very confident he'll turn it around, and if he fulfills that in the next 8 games, then there's no reason why he can't try and build something. I think he's got Ron Gourlay backing him, and the owners will back him as well, and everything's going right off the field. He's just got to get the results on the field, and like I say, I think confident was the main thing that came from him on Friday.
As mentioned earlier, of course, the only other club figure at the press conference was Ron Gourlay. Did he have much to say on why the change was made and sort of why he decided to bring Clement in? Obviously, he's worked with him at Chelsea previously, so
it's like I say, I think he was keen to point out that the owners wanted to give Jaap as long as possible, but when that was the case, that they had to make a change, then he got onto Paul Clement pretty quickly. I think he'll see, like you say, he knew him from before, and I think the words he used were that he wanted to bring in young, ambitious people that are going to try and push this club forward. Ambitious people like I say, Brian and like Jed Roddy, they brought in, and they want to try and build a nucleus of people like that behind the scenes, and they think Paul Clement's the man to lead them forward. I think he's got a little bit of a point to prove as well after what happened at his last couple of jobs, and I think that was the main reason really. He wanted to bring in someone fairly young with good ideas, good experience as well. He went in at Swansea last year and kept him up in a similar sort of situation. He had a bit longer there, but he's done with that, and he's managed in the Championship and done fairly well, I think, at Derby. Some might say he's a bit unfortunate to get sacked there, but so he's got experience at both levels. I think he'll get respect from the players that he's worked with in the past, and it seems like a good fit on paper. Obviously it depends entirely what happens in the next few weeks, but I think as soon as it became clear they wanted to move Jaap on, I think Ron pushed pretty hard for Paul Clement and got him in pretty quickly.
As a side point, obviously we saw, in addition to Stam leaving, Andrew Torderink and Said Bukati also left the club. In the press conference, Paul Clement mentioned that they were in talks with 2 people that he'd worked with before potentially coming in, but as far as I understand, nothing's been confirmed as of yet. No,
I think maybe by the time people listen to this, it might have been this afternoon. I think he's going to possibly, like I say, they are in talks with a couple of guys, and you'd imagine it's quite possibly somebody who may be working at Swansea. I think Nigel Gibbs has been mentioned, but there's no names that have been been confirmed just yet, but I think he is looking to get in two people to work in alongside with Michael Gilks and Dave Besant. I think those will be the sort of the five that the team of five. If he can, we want to tie them down pretty quickly. Though obviously the games are coming around thick and fast now, so I would imagine those talks are pretty well advanced, and they might be able to announce something in the next couple of days, hopefully.
Yeah, of course, there is the Clement's first pre-match press conference this afternoon, so we may well hear something then. Looking at Clement's CV then, obviously most of his time as a coach has been within academy football, and also as an assistant to Carlo Ancelotti at Chelsea, Real Madrid, PSG and Bayern Munich, so he's got some good connections. He took his first managerial role at Derby, as mentioned, in June 2015, and lasted 8 months there before he was sacked, with the club fifth in the Championship and 5 points off top spot, but they hadn't been on the best run of form. He then took over as Swansea manager in January 2017, keeping them safe from relegation and even been nominated for the Premier League Manager of the Season award. Unfortunately, though, he couldn't keep it up in the current campaign, and he was sacked just before Christmas with the Swans bottom of the table. Overall, Tom, how do you view sort of Clement's credentials? And the big question is, do you think he can save Reading from relegation?
Yeah, I think like I say, I think they would have stayed up anyway. I think they've just about got enough. But I think he's the kind of person, like you said, at Swansea last year, he came in and kept them up, and I think he'll have a similar effect here. I think there's maybe a few question marks longer term, just purely on the fact that he's never stayed anywhere in management for that long. But I think in the short term, he's certainly the man for the job, and I think some have said maybe it's a bit of a low risk move coming in when if they do go down, he can just move on and say that it was Jaap Stam's thing. But I don't entirely buy into that. I think if he starts the season in the Premier League and ends it in League One, I think that's tough for any manager's pride to take, really, and it'll be hard for him to find a decent next job, I think. So I think it's a big role for him to take now, and he knows he has to keep Reading up, otherwise his managerial career is going to be it'll be sort of 3 sackings in a row, or three clubs he's left pretty quickly in a row anyway, and it'll be hard to see where he goes from there. So I think it's a big few months for him. But yeah, I think he's, like I say, he's got the CV, he's worked with these top players before, but additionally in management he's been in this sort of situation just a few months ago, or 12 months ago if you like, but probably an even worse situation, like you mentioned there, Reading in the relegation zone, so he's not as worried as perhaps when he went in at Swansea. So yeah, I think he's got the credentials to do it, and if he can start with a win on Friday night, then things will suddenly look a lot better again, and hopefully they can start, like he said, they want him to look up the table rather than down the table. So yeah, he's got the credentials to do it, they've got the players to do it. We've been saying that sort of thing most of the season, though, so the players have got to go and do it now. Like you say, they've come out and said that maybe they let Stam down, so they need to perform now for the new manager.
In terms of Clement's playing style, we've spoken to some Derby and some Swansea fans, both of which you can read on the Tilehurst End online now. And it seems as though he's very similar actually to Jaap Stam, in that he plays fairly defensive football, sort of with short passes and patient build-up play from the back, which I'm sure a lot of Reading fans won't be very happy with. But if that gets results, I'm sure that we won't be complaining. Do you think Clement's style was sort of one of the key factors in him getting the job, Tom, and do you think he'll be able to pull it off better than Stam did ultimately? I think Jaap said on a couple of occasions that the owners want that style of football, so it would have been a strange decision to then go for somebody completely different. I think obviously in the short term they just need to find the results anyway, really, and I think everyone sort of acknowledges that. But yeah, we asked Clement about the philosophy and playing style, and he said he's not going to be all out attack and it's not going to be all out defence. He wants to try and get a balanced side. So I think he's probably looking at the players he's got and thinking they've got enough there to grind out a few results now, and then over the summer he can rebuild his squad a little bit, and I'm sure there'll be quite a few changes to it if he's still in charge, and they'll move on from there. But yeah, I think, like you mentioned, that I don't think they wanted to bring somebody in just to go back to square one, really, in terms of a completely different style of manager. I think it's more of a evolution of what Jaap was doing, really just trying to tweak it and make it better and get it more back to what happened last year, because I think like you say, it hasn't worked out this season, and many of the fans weren't too happy with it last season either, in fairness. But yeah, you just got to hope that Clement can deliver it somewhat more entertaining, I suppose, and first and foremost he's got to keep Reading in the league. That's the main aim, and then from there you can sort of tweak that, I think, as the months go on. One thing I will say is that writing Clement off before he's even managed a single game achieves virtually nothing at all. And sort of now, more than anything else, we need to get behind him and the team for these crucial final 8 games. And of course, the first of those crucial games comes at home to QPR at 5:30 p.m. on Friday. And we'll move on to preview that now. The first meeting, of course, between these two sides earlier this season came on the opening day of the campaign when Reading lost 2-0 and Thiago Ilori was sent off. Connor Washington scored both goals that day, and he'll probably be a key threat once again. Matt Smith is also another one to look out for. He's got 7 goals and 8 assists this season, whilst in midfield, Luke Freeman has 5 goals and 11 assists. Overall, though, although I mean, it is a fairly good game for Paul Clement to open on, sort of, especially being at home, and it is certainly winnable for him to kick off with.
Yeah, so obviously they've got a lot of the top teams to play away from home in the next few months, and you look at this as a game that, if they are going to stay up, that these are the points, these are the times we've got to get the points. I think home to a side with not a great deal to play for, but I think it's going to be a tough one. I think QPR, they've hit a little bit of form now. They seem to be playing with not much pressure at all. I think Ian Holloway's bringing through a few of the younger guys as well who are performing pretty well, and most of the guys in that team now are just, I suppose, playing for contracts and just playing to get themselves out there a little bit. I think, like I said, they've held Fulham and beat Villa, I think, in the last 2 games. So if they can do that, they'll certainly feel confident coming down to Reading. But yeah, like you say, hopefully the fans come back in on Friday. I'd like to think that there would be quite a few in. I think QPR have sold out their section, so it should make for a pretty good atmosphere. And yeah, it's like I say, it's a decent game for him. If you can get the home win in your first game, then suddenly I see a few people have maybe written Clement off before he's even started. But if you win your first game, and that will get fans immediately on side, and then they go into the more tricky ones, maybe as a not as a free hit, but if you've got the 3 points under your belt already, they might have a 6-point cushion then to the bottom 3 again, and you can breathe a little bit easier, and there's not a huge amount of as much pressure as there is for tomorrow's game. But yeah, I think if he loses tomorrow, then it's going to be a tricky one. But in terms of if you could pick a fixture, I suppose on paper you'd pick a home game against a team with not a great deal to play for, I suppose. Yeah,
certainly with sort of trips to Villa, to Fulham and to Cardiff still to come. This is sort of one of the games out of these final 8 ones that you'd expect them to get something from. Obviously, but having said that, of course, we have always found it quite tough against QPR in recent years. We've not actually beaten them at home since 2010. Jamie Mackey, of course, grabbing the winner in the meeting at the Madstad last season. As you mentioned there, Tom, their current form, QPR are unbeaten in 4 games and drew 2-2 with Fulham last time out. So that's a very impressive result for them. But they do sit 15th in the table on 47 points. So they're not going up, they're not going down. And as we mentioned there, Reading could potentially take advantage of the fact that QPR have little to play for. Looking at Reading's team, then they've had 2 weeks to hopefully get some players back fit. And as a reminder, before the international break, the lengthy injury list stood at Axel Andersson, John Daly-Bodvarsson, Tommy Elphick, Callum Harriott, Chris Martin, Paul McShane, Joseph Mendes and Omar Richards, all sidelined obviously, plus the long-term absentees and Gareth McCleary, Jordan Abita and Stephen Quinn. But out of those other players, Tom, that we might see in the next few weeks, are we expecting to see any of them return tomorrow or potentially Tuesday against Aston Villa? Yeah,
so I think we'll probably find out for sure a bit more later on, but I think it looks like Paul McShane's back in training now, which would be a big boost. I think he needs a bit more experience back there. I think Paul Clement said he worked with McShane actually back in when he was coaching the Ireland under-21s, which is a few years ago now. But he knows Paul McShane, and I think he'll have him straight back in the team if he's fit. Which I think they need that now. If McShane and Moore are playing, I'd feel a lot more confident in the team to keep a few more goals out. So he's got a big calling goal as well to play there. I presume Vita would come back in straight away, but you can't be totally sure. But in terms of the others, I think Bodvarsson's, I don't think that was a serious one, if I remember rightly, so I'd imagine he'd be back involved. And the rest of them, it's I think Tommy Elphick must be due back fairly soon as well. But yeah, let's say we've had no real, in terms of injury news. Obviously on Friday we were just speaking about him in the club, and then he's speaking about injuries and what have you later on today or Thursday, so we'll find out a bit more then. But yeah, I don't think anyone's picked up anything else over the international break we know of, so there'll be a team there good enough to win that game. It's just a case of if Paul Clement can get them playing as he wants to. Yep.
Do you think what sort of lineup do you think we'll see? Do you think he'll stick sort of with Stam's 4-3-3, or do you think we could still see some of the youngsters? Obviously, Tom Holmes has been involved in recent weeks, likes of Sam Smith. Do you think he'll stick with those, or do you think he'll try and go for a more experienced approach?
Yeah, I think it was that question was put to him really. I mean, I can't see Tom Holmes really playing, especially if McShane's back now, which I suppose is understandable. But he said he's all for bringing these young guys through, but perhaps right now isn't the best time to do it. So I don't think anyone would. I don't think the young players maybe would even be too surprised if some of the more experienced guys came in this situation just to get those couple of wins that they need to push a bit clear. And I'd be surprised if sort of the likes of Smith and Holmes were playing. Obviously Liam Kelly's a bit of a different situation. I think he's a bit more experienced in the team now, but I think he'll look at his attacking options. Like I say, I think Chris Martin, he's worked with him before, and you've just got Clement as well, and probably Bodvarsson should be about. So yeah, I think he's more likely to go with one of those. But say Sam Smith scored a goal in the last game, so I don't think he'll rule him out completely. It depends, I suppose, what they've showed as well this week in training. But I think he's more likely to opt for the guys that he knows a bit more and he knows can deliver at this level. It's not perhaps quite that straightforward. If they've still got a few injuries, there's still a few gaps to fill, maybe a sort of left back and what have you. But I think he'll try and stick to the guys that he knows a bit better and he knows can get him out of this situation. I think that's probably what he did last season. So that'll be what I expect, but we'll find out tomorrow, I suppose.
We might even see Paul Clement pick Pelle Clement. No relation between those two, but overall, then, how do you see this one going for the prediction, Tom? You did correctly predict that Norwich would beat Reading 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to a few QPR Reading games, and they're always pretty dire affairs. And I think it's. I say you got to hope that maybe the new manager could affect that a little bit. But I think it could end up being. I think I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw, which wouldn't be a disaster. But I'd just love them to get a win and just try and get the feel good factor again a little bit tomorrow. But I think in terms of prediction, I'll have to go for a 1-0.
I'm going to be optimistic. In Paul Clement's first game, trying to say 2-1, making it hopefully a very good Friday indeed. As we come towards the end of the show, then, Tom, what can we look forward to on the working and paper in the next few days? Yeah,
so should be at the game tomorrow night, which will be obviously the main focus. See how all the team news as it comes in there, and then the game and the reaction as well. So that'll be up on Wokingham today and on Twitter at Tom J Crocker, and then I think there's another Villa away, I think, isn't it, on Tuesday? So so it's going to be a busy couple of weeks. We've had a couple of weeks it's been a busy couple of weeks anyway. It should have been a bit quieter, but obviously Reading had other ideas. So the next few weeks are going to be busy ones, but hopefully not. But hopefully pull away from the bottom three a bit more this time. Yeah,
I think certainly without the managerial sacking, we would have had a lot less to talk about on this week's podcast extra. Thank you very much for joining me once again this week, Tom.
Nice one, thanks, Ollie.
No worries at all. And of course, myself and Tom will be back next week to look back on Paul Clement's first two games in charge against QPR, and then, as mentioned, Aston Villa away next Tuesday, before previewing the home game with Preston next weekend. In terms of the main show, there will potentially be one over the weekend, but of course it is Easter, so I think that remains unconfirmed, but stay tuned to Twitter with regards to that. If you are looking for something to listen to, then I would thoroughly recommend the podcast Mark and Ben Greenwood recorded at the Star Hall of Fame last week, featuring interviews with the likes of Kevin Doyle, Brian McDermott, Sir John Medeski and Nick Hammond. And of course, at analyse.com, we'll also have full pre- and post-match coverage of the next two games, plus a host of other content. This week we've had a full look back at Jaap Stam's reign and a look ahead to Paul Clement's time in charge as well, whilst I've also analysed our final 8 games in comparison to our relegation rivals. So go check that out. But for now, what I will say is here's hoping that Paul Clement can end our winless run. Thank you very much for listening to today's show. Have a great Easter, and come on you R's.
Get social with the boys.
Find them on Twitter
at the Tilehurst End
and facebook.com/the Tilehurst End.